Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. But listen, there was one super marquee game that we absolutely have to discuss. It came in Norman, Oklahoma, only top 25 matchup of the week 2 college football slate. And I'll say this, I think it actually kind of largely lived up to my personal expectations. I thought it was a good back and forth game, even though Oklahoma ends up winning by winning by 2 scores. Yeah, I just said it. Yeah, I gave away a little bit of the punchline, but final score, Oklahoma 24, Michigan 13. Oklahoma in what we know is essentially a make or break year for Brent Venables. He went out, he made the big moves in the offseason. They get their first signature win. And I'll say this, one, I actually think that's in some ways we're actually talking about the wrong thing with Oklahoma in a good way, because there's a lot of good to talk about. But two, also on top of it, you know, you start to look at the schedule now. Some of those games that look like losses, or I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you got to be fired up. But let's talk about this game. And listen, we all know what the story is, right? We all know what the story was coming in. We all know what the story was coming into the season. It was the transfer quarterback, John Mateer. And much like the quarterback that he was playing against, Bryce Underwood, who we'll talk about at some point, you know, this was kind of the spotlight game. Oklahoma plays Illinois State in week 1. I don't know how many of you pulled up a streaming service to watch that one. That's why you got to go to the Circus Sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs. You can watch all these games. But I don't know how many of you pulled up the a streaming service to watch week 1. But we all know John Mateer, Oklahoma, they're not going to be defined by what they do against Illinois. But the schedule gets much tougher starting week 2, starting Saturday night, the 6th of September, against Michigan. Bryce Underwood, the freshman quarterback coming in, John Mateer, the transfer to Oklahoma. Listen, we knew what the reputation was with Mateer coming in, kind of this dual threat guy, does a little bit of everything. And I got to give credit where it's due, right? You know, you look at a guy that came in with super high expectations coming in, a guy that many, including me, believed was the number 1 player in the transfer portal, or at least the number 1 quarterback. But I do think there were serious conversations, right? Okay, it's great you did it again at Washington State. It's great you did it against Pac-2 opponents last year, but you're mostly playing, you know, the San Diego States, the Oregon States, the whatever. What's it going to be like when you play big boy football? Well, frankly, kind of looked exactly like it did last year at Washington State. Mateer, to his credit, in my opinion, completely controlled that game when he had the ball in his hands, okay? The stats tell us one thing: 271 yards passing, 21 of 34 passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The interception, by the way, was a tipped pass, but had the ball. Oh, by the way, also 74 yards rushing with 2 rushing touchdowns. So first off, already he's probably the best player with the ball in his hands from a run perspective. He certainly can handle things from a pass perspective. But when I look at John Mateer, what stood out to me, and I hate to use like the cliche buzzword, talking point, whatever, but it was kind of the moxie, right? It was when you needed a big play, he found a way. It was when you needed a first down, he kind of always knew where to go with the ball, what to do. The moment was never too big. Checks down, takes off with his legs. You know, is he the fastest guy? It doesn't matter, because he just always seemed to find a crease in the defense. And, you know, every time they needed a big play, he largely got it. So John Mateer is the headliner. Let me also say this, though, because I think it's getting a little bit lost in the shuffle. Oklahoma, and this to me is the bigger story, I think, is that you now have paired an elite quarterback with what I believe to be just one of the best defenses in college football. And this was the crazy part about Oklahoma, and we talked about it all last year, and really all of the summer, heading into the season. But this Oklahoma defense, I think it's easy to forget. It was a top 30 defense nationally, which one is impressive considering who they played last year at LSU, Alabama, you know, Texas, whatever. But Tennessee, by the way, was obviously very good. But they had a top 30 defense. The issue was they finished 113th nationally in total offense. And so the two big questions were, one, can John Mateer provide the offense that you need? But 2, defensively, can that be the difference? Can you keep the level defensively that you were at while also improving the offense? And if you do, all of a sudden we're talking about a college football playoff contender, an SEC championship contender, certainly a team that's capable of at least getting to Atlanta. That defense lived up to lived up to expectations, right? In this game, I think it's worth noting, again, if you just look at the box score, Michigan with 288 yards of total offense, you say, okay, Michigan actually moved the ball pretty well. Not if you watch the game, because Michigan had one play of 75 yards. So a 75-yard run by Justice Haynes set up their only touchdown. You take out that play, that's basically 213 yards of offense right there. And then they got another 20-plus yards on the final series of the game when Oklahoma was up 2 scores. And on top of it, they were in prevent defense. So you take out one play and prevent defense when you have the game in hand. That's well under 200 yards. The one touchdown was just a bust. And then, oh, by the way, one of the field goals came off of a muffed punt. So the defense was lights out all night. And so if you're an Oklahoma fan, to me, that's what has to be so exciting about this team at this moment in time. You have that dude at quarterback. You have, on top of it, a defense that I think has a chance to be special. And I know Michigan, freshman quarterback on the road, whatever. I don't care. You held them to basically 200 yards of total offense. Again, take out one play and we're at 200 yards of total offense. And then on top of that, I also think there's this. You got the quarterback, you got the defense, and listen, there's no easy schedule in the SEC, but all of a sudden, when I look at this schedule for Oklahoma, I think it's kind of sort of manageable, right? Or it's getting more manageable by the week. First of all, you have the big out-of-conference win. We know that out-of-conference wins are going to carry weight. The committee with this, what was the stat again? The schedule strength stat or whatever. They're going to value teams that really push themselves in the out-of-conference, the anti-Indiana, if you will. So you hosted Michigan, which just won a national championship 2 years ago at home. But then beyond that, I think here's the important part. You look at the rest of the SEC, all of a sudden games that you just said, I don't really know about, back in July and August, all of a sudden it feels a lot different today than it did 2 months ago, 2 weeks ago even, doesn't it? Look at Texas. Listen, we'll talk Arch Manning later in the show. I'm not ready to crown him because he was good against San Jose State. But all of a sudden, let me ask you this. Neutral field, 50-50 fan split. Who do you trust more in a big spot? John Mateer or Arch Manning? I've seen them both against pretty good defenses. I think I know who I trust. I think it's John Mateer. Not saying that Oklahoma is going to win that game, but all of a sudden that game looks a lot different. Alabama. It's yes, you have to go on the road, but again, Alabama's another one. I'm sorry that it's hard for me to get excited about a 73-0 win over UL Monroe when all you've been hearing all week is how terrible you are. So Alabama all of a sudden. By the way, LSU, who I include myself, I crowned them after week 1. Oh, you go to Clemson, you get that win. You're unbelievable. You know who else almost got a win at Clemson? Troy. Maybe LSU isn't that good. South Carolina wasn't great yesterday. Ole Miss, by the way, looks beatable as they struggled at Kentucky. I just bring it up because I look at this situation for Oklahoma and I sit there and say, I think there are more wins on the schedule, especially if John Mateer plays in the manner that he did. But I give Brent Venables credit, right? This was a make or break year. We knew the defense was good. 1, he takes over the defense. He says, enough is enough. Nobody else is doing my job that I can do better than them. And then 2, listen, say what you want, right? Oklahoma is one of those schools that has the resources to pull something off. They needed a new offensive coordinator. They didn't necessarily go for the biggest name. They went for the guy who had the offense with the quarterback. They bring them both. It translates and they have success.